It's been over 8 years, and after countless hours of research, analysis, and just looking at every clue from top to bottom, I think I may have just found the one tiny, incredibly overlooked detail that finally solves FNAF's most confusing mystery. Midnight Motorist is something that's been said by every single FNAF theorist and their mother about 500,000 times at this point. Midnight Motorist, the infamous hidden 8-bit minigame from Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, or simply FNAF 6, is one of the most debated topics in all of FNAF, and to this day, fans are still coming up with new theories that explain what exactly it's supposed to tell us. But what if I told you that it's all been for nothing? Because Midnight Motorist is unsolvable. No matter which way you look at it, any attempt to assemble the puzzle pieces of this minigame and string them together into a coherent story that fits seamlessly into the grand narrative of FNAF will result in an explanation that falls somewhere between mostly solid with severe holes to absurdly convoluted to the point of complete insanity. So join me today as we look at everything, and I do mean everything, in this minigame from every possible angle, and I'll show you why solving Midnight Motorist truly is impossible. First, let's take a quick look at what Midnight Motorist is on the surface, just so we're all starting out on the same page. I'm sure most of you watching know this minigame like the back of your hand already, so I'll try to keep it brief. In FNAF 6, you access Midnight Motorist by purchasing and playing the arcade game of the same name. It starts out as a generic top-down racer, but there's a point where you can exit the highway and start driving a purple car down a side road in the woods instead. There's a clearing where you can pull over and walk around outside the car as Orange Guy, the player character. The clearing is almost completely empty, save for this little blob of gray pixels in the corner. Theorists call this the mound. If you continue down the road, you eventually reach the parking lot of a place called Junior's, where Green Guy is standing outside the door. If you walk up to him, he tells you that you know you can't be here. Eventually, the music fades away and you make it to a lone house in another clearing, which you can enter on foot. Inside the house is Couch Potato, who's sitting and watching TV. They tell you to leave him alone tonight because he had a rough day. Once you walk up to a door, presumably the bedroom of who Couch Potato was talking about, Orange Guy knocks and scolds him for closing the door. He yells at Couch Potato that this is his house and he can't ignore him like that. He yells again for them to open the door, then goes around the back of the house to find that their window is broken with a trail of footprints leading away from it and a single pair of large 3-toed footprints nearby. Orange Guy says he ran off to that place again. He'll be sorry when he gets back. So we have all of these different roles of people and places, and every Midnight Motorist theory starts by plugging characters and locations into these roles. The idea is that once each role is properly filled, the puzzle will be solved and we can understand what this minigame is actually trying to tell us. Its story. But there's some additional context to this minigame that also gets factored in by theorists. In the game files, this story section of the minigame is actually called Later That Night, which implies that it's taking place later in the same night of some other event. This event is one of the key variables that theorists have to solve for in the Midnight Motorist equation. So with all of these variables at our disposal, let's begin with the simplest and most popular starting point, and see if we can get somewhere with it. Oh, and by the way, I'll be setting this clock over here just so we don't lose track of time, because when you spend too long in the Midnight Motorist rabbit hole, you may start to go insane. When the clock strikes 12, it's already too late. Most people think that Orange Guy is William Afton. He fits the profile as a guy who drives a purple car and whose family owns a lone house in the woods, like we see in FNAF 4. Kind of. If this is William, then Later That Night could be referring to the night he killed Charlotte, not only because the purple car lines up, but because we know it was raining on that night too. Oh, and he's orange instead of purple because Scott thought it would be less confusing that way. So now you have William Afton fleeing a crime scene and stopping at a bar called Junior's, getting turned away because he's already clearly wasted or he's just a known delinquent, and pulling up to his house to find one of his family members watching TV and his son having ran off to that place again, which all seems well and good. But now we have to figure out which of his two sons ran away. Well, since Couch Potato has a gray shirt and gray text, just like Michael in FNAF 4, and he's even watching TV just like Michael in Sister Location, the troubled runaway has to be Bite Victim, right? Well, it sure seems like it. He has a lot of rough days, and he's kind of a troubled outcast type. But if that's the case, then the questions and contradictions quickly spiral out of control. First, where is he running off to? It seems like a Freddy's location of some kind, since that's where most of the places we see in these games are. But the Freddy's location open when he's alive is somewhere he explicitly hates, so he wouldn't be going there. Unless this takes place before he becomes traumatized, at a time when he actually loves this restaurant and runs away to it frequently. So fine, sure, that's where he's going. But who do these footprints belong to? Well, there's one mysterious animatronic we know likes to lead people around places, and in the Twisted ones, he even leads the characters to Charlie, Shadow Freddy. Shadow Freddy manifests as a result of Charlotte's murder, and on the same night, just minutes after Charlotte was killed at Freddy's/Fredbear's, he teleports outside Bite Victim's window, tells him to follow him, and whisks him away to the restaurant to see Charlotte's corpse and traumatize him. Boom, solved. Except, not really. Wasn't Charlie's murder scene where William just was a place that took him miles of highway to get to his house from? Is Bite Victim running at light speed to get there, or is Shadow Freddy perhaps teleporting him across space and time? Also, if this is trying to confirm that Bite Victim saw Charlotte's murder, why would that then make him afraid of the Springlock suits? As far as we know, William murdered Charlotte in nothing but his purple birthday suit. No Springlock in sight. And then, what is in the mound here? Well, the goat John FNAF suggested that it might be Susie's dog, because if this minigame connects to Security Puppet, maybe it connects to Fruity Maze too. And this is all done to establish a timeline of events, from MCI to Charlotte to the Bite Victim. That honestly makes a lot of sense to me. But it just leaves the question of why Shadow Freddy would want Bite Victim to see Charlotte. What does that mean for the story? Scott said he intended FNAF 6 to tie up loose ends. So which loose ends does this tie up exactly? Finally showing us what Bite Victim saw? I think there'd be about a million easier ways to do that. But maybe it's not Shadow Freddy leading him to Charlotte. Maybe it's something else entirely. Look at the direction of Bite Victim's footprints. Strangely enough, they lead towards Junior's on the map, which we thought was a bar, but hold on a minute. William gets turned away from Junior's, just like how he's turned away from the FNAF 2 location. And the FNAF 2 location is kind of a Junior Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a successor to the original. And if you pull out your handy survival logbook, you'll find that the faded text asks someone, possibly Bite Victim, if their favorite ride was the carousel. And it just so happens that the one place we ever see a carousel in FNAF is at the FNAF 2 location. That may sound absolutely insane because the one thing we know about that location is that it was opened in 1987, and Bite Victim died in 1983. But there is now more evidence than ever that the FNAF 2 location existed in some form as far back as 1982. When the FNAF 2 movie came out and showed us a 1982 location that featured the puppet, the toys, and a carousel, it reignited general theory discussion about the FNAF 2 location and what that game meant by grand reopening. Maybe it was meant to be a grand reopening of that original 1982 location, and maybe Midnight Motorist has been setting that up this whole time. Freddn has two amazing, incredibly well-researched videos about the 1982 location and how it connects to Midnight Motorist, which I totally suggest you watch if you're interested in diving even deeper into that rabbit hole. On a side note, matpat actually arrived at a very similar conclusion years ago, without the movies or anything post-UCN to base it on. We thought he was crazy, but he may have just been right too early. Maybe next we'll find out that he was right about Mike Victim too. Anyway, if Junior's is the 1982 Freddy's, and that's where Bite Victim has been running off to because he just can't get enough of that carousel, that would explain the line about running off to that place again. But it still leaves the question of the footprints. Who do they belong to? Also, if the whole point of this minigame was to establish that, actually guys, the literal only location I gave you a solid date for, yeah, that had actually been open since before the Bite Victim died in 1983, and at the same time as Fredbear's Family Diner, and or wherever Charlotte was killed and Circus Babies, it just like closed and reopened later. And even though Bite Victim hated Fredbear's Family Diner, he loved being there so much that he ran off to it every night because it was the only place that gave him respite from his terrible home life. Okay? Why? What does that actually add to the story? That just seems like a whole lot of random information to throw into a game that was supposed to clarify stuff. It's not that there's no evidence, it's just that you really have to bend over backwards to fit everything together into something remotely coherent that doesn't ultimately tell us anything. It seems like Bite Victim being the Runaway is unlikely, even though at first glance it really seems like he is. So if it's not him, then it must be... If Michael Afton isn't Couch Potato, then he could well be the Runaway instead of Bite Victim. Which, while it would definitely make Couch Potato's existence odd, would free up a lot of space timeline-wise, since we don't have to confine everything to the short span of time when Bite Victim was alive. Now we can have that place being Bite Victim's grave, which would make sense as somewhere Mike would visit often. And it might even be what the mound is supposed to be. In that case, maybe the footprints belong to the ghostly Golden Freddy. It's his brother literally haunting him. It kind of lines up with what we see in the FNAF movie too, because Golden Freddy is clearly able to teleport far outside the bounds of the restaurant, show up at people's houses, and lead them away places. He's able to beat the doors off of Aunt Jane, so he'd probably be able to leave some footprints too. Now we're getting somewhere with a very logical explanation. But again, we're left with the question of what does this mean for the story? Well, it could simply be to set up a timeline of events, one that shows us that by the time William kills Charlotte, Bite Victim is not only already dead, but has made contact with Michael. That's fine, but it once again feels like an overly complicated way to get that across. If you see my other videos, you know that it's entirely possible to construct a coherent death order, all from pre-FFPS based evidence. But it's always been hotly contested, so maybe Scott wanted to put the debate to rest with this minigame. The problem is, that clearly didn't work at all. He did a very bad job clarifying that one. It could also be meant to give us more characterization of Michael and Bite Victim, because it shows us a clear example of Bite Victim's spirit manifesting in the form of Michael's immense guilt, which explains why he's followed by him everywhere he goes in the other games. I actually like that idea a lot, but we're still missing something. One line of dialogue in the game that quickly turns this somewhat satisfying explanation into utter insanity. But in case you don't feel ready for that just yet, let's stop the clock and take a break from this Midnight Motorist madness. If you've been enjoying the video so far, please leave a like. It really helps me out and lets me know that you guys find this more exploratory type of video worth watching. Also, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I do FNAF theories, discussions, and live streams on a regular basis, and I would love for you to join me for the next one. Now, strap in, because the countdown to midnight is about to start once again. He will be sorry when he gets back. That one final line of dialogue in this minigame sure feels important. It feels like William is abusing Mike and doles out some kind of emotional or physical punishment on him regularly. Maybe it's intensified since he accidentally killed his other son. We have to ask, what punishment for Michael could Midnight Motorist be purposefully drawing our attention to? Something that actually means something for the story. Nightmare gas experiments taking place in a replica of their house in the underground sister location bunker, which is actually what we're seeing in the night gameplay of FNAF 4. Of course, I mean, what else would it be? Now we have to finally get into something that I've been avoiding like the plague since my first video, because it throws a massive wrench into the narrative of FNAF 4 and sister location that I've been trying to painstakingly put together in a way that makes any kind of sense at all. Didophobia, the final short story from the book series Tales from the Pizzaplex. In Didophobia, a 7-year-old kid named Rory is being stalked by the FNAF 4 nightmare animatronics in a house that is unmistakably the same as Michael's, the one we see in FNAF 4 and Sister Location. Rory eventually discovers that he's not actually a little kid in a house at all. He's a teenager that's been trapped in an underground testing facility that's been running on autopilot for 10 years. A facility that's testing the effects of fear on children using nightmare-inducing hallucinogenic gas, which causes the nightmare animatronics, actually just blank mannequins, to appear the way they do. What's even more insane is that when he briefly escapes and explores the facility, the book makes it clear that he's inside Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, which seems to have been abandoned some time ago. It's described in such exact detail that it's impossible to deny, and it even specifically references tubes and canisters of gas that we actually see in the game, and were never explained. He eventually hears a message from a middle-aged man with an emotionally manipulative voice, probably William Afton, who reminds him why he supposedly ran away from home to begin with and convinces him to turn the gas back on and keep the experiment going. Is this book telling us that in the games, Michael went through something similar to Rory? Is it explaining not only what his punishment was for running away in Midnight Motorist, but what the connections between Sister Location and FNAF 4 actually meant the entire time? Man, I wish it were that easy. First of all, the book where this story is from, B72, came out in October 2023, over 8 years after FNAF 4. Which wouldn't mean anything, except for the fact that Scott said he was disappointed that nobody got the point of FNAF 2 a literal month after that game came out. There is absolutely no way Scott wanted everyone to get that from FNAF 4. On top of that, there are perfectly good explanations of the connections between FNAF 4 and Sister Location that don't involve massively changing fundamental elements of the story. I made a whole video on that. That's just the meta problems with this connection. But if you actually read the text of Didophobia, there are clear indications that it's not just a retelling of the games using different characters, it's a creative reimagining of the games that tells a different story entirely. The circus babies that Rory explores in the book is decrepit and abandoned, having been running on complete autopilot for at least 10 years. The facility is empty and the funtime animatronics aren't even active anymore. A far cry from what we see in Sister Location. Michael is working as an employee in a fully operational facility with other human employees. And he's not escaping from experiments he's been trapped inside of his entire life. He's literally leaving and returning to the facility on a nightly basis. You could say that he was in the experiments when he was younger and now he's just returning to the facility after many years. But if Midnight Motorist is at least one of the first instances of William putting him there, that doesn't leave a whole lot of time for him to do anything else in the timeline, like work at the other restaurant locations. And why is William testing the effects of nightmare gas in the games again? When does that ever come up in any point in the story? Also, a lot of people point to the fact that Rory supposedly ran away from home before ending up in the nightmare facility to draw a parallel between him and the Midnight Motorist Runaway, whether that be Bite Victim or Michael. But that's not actually what happens in the story. When Rory contacts his childhood friend Wade, Wade mentions that there was a police effort to find him after he went missing, but the only person to say that he actually ran away is William, who is quite literally gaslighting him to convince him to stay in the facility. To me, this is clearly subtext that shows William kidnapped Rory, and he never actually ran away from home at all, making the parallel to Midnight Motorist obsolete. You know what? Maybe we are just barking up the wrong tree. We're looking for all these connections to other parts of the FNAF universe, and we are just reading way too hard into this whole minigame. If Orange Guy is William, you just cannot plug the variables into the equation to make a coherent story. It just doesn't work. Let's just take a step back and consider, what if Orange Guy is not William at all, and this whole minigame is about someone else? Picture this. The year is 1983, or 1985. A drunk and abusive father is coming home late at night after speeding down the highway in his fashionable purple car, just like everyone else on the highway. It's later that night, meaning just later in the same night of the minigame. He stops by his favorite mound of dirt in a clearing near his home and thinks about what may be underneath it. A dead dog, a little girl, a giant furry monster, or an elevator to an underground nightmare gas testing facility. The possibilities are truly endless, he thinks to himself, but in the end, it was his choice whether to look into it further or not. He chooses to keep on driving. He stops by his favorite bar, Junior's. It's just a bar, an animatronic-free bar, in a building which has been that bar for its entire existence, and will continue to be that bar forever and ever. He tries to go in for another drink, but he gets turned away because he's already absolutely plastered. He continues on his way, pulls up to his inconspicuous lone house in the middle of the woods, and passes his balding wife on the way inside. She tiredly pleads with him to leave their poor son alone tonight because he's already been having a hard time. He has no friends, nobody to watch out for him, and his only friends are the characters at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, especially a particularly kind and charming yellow rabbit. After trying to get into his room, his drunk and angry dad goes around the side of the house to find that he has once again run away to a place he always runs off to, a place he truly considers to be his home. His father is so blasted he doesn't even see the giant rabbit-shaped footprints in the dirt. It seems like this time his rabbit friend came to him. Orange Guy's last line is tinged with cruel irony. He will be sorry when he gets back. He's so blind to how neglectful of a father he's been, so blind to how little he appreciated his son while he was there, and now he'll never get back, because he is one of the victims of the missing children incident. This, to me, is by far the most narratively satisfying and comprehensive explanation of Midnight Motorist. So good, in fact, that it graduates from being a passably coherent video game cutscene into a genuinely well-written and moving story. A story about the troubled home life of the kind of kid who William would target. It characterizes him as a villain, and it even characterizes one of the MCI kids, whose actual story moments are few and far between in the series. Maybe that was the loose end that Scott wanted to tie up, and maybe that is what Midnight Motorist is all about. Well, we made it to midnight, and we did not solve Midnight Motorist. My personal favorite explanation, which I just went over at the end, gets basically destroyed by a little game called 5 Laps at Freddy's, which had a demo come out in 2024. In that game, one of the playable vehicles is called the Midnight Motor, and it sports a Spring Bonnie bobblehead and dice ornaments whose values add up to 87. I think the MCI happened in 83, but it could also well be 85. But it's not 87. Just to be extra confusing, the unused description of this vehicle in the game files basically confirms that it's driven by William to flee a crime scene. But here's the thing, and this is what I mean when I say that Midnight Motorist is genuinely impossible to solve. 5 Laps at Freddy's is not even out yet in its final form, and this description is not even used in the in-game demo. On top of that, the game is being developed by Click Team, not Scott Cawthon. So who knows how much oversight he had on any of these details. I'd like to believe that Scott has control of his own franchise, but based on what we've seen since Steel Wool came into the picture, it's literally anyone's guess. This Midnight Motor could literally be the Click Team developers going, oh, it's a kart racing game about FNAF. So of course we have to have a Midnight Motorist car and a track. But since Scott didn't tell them the actual lore of Midnight Motorist, they based the design off of popular fan theories and interpretations. And obviously there's nothing wrong with that at all, but it's stuff like this that makes Midnight Motorist impossible, because we don't even know which clues are valid to use as evidence. This isn't just a problem exclusive to Midnight Motorist, it's affecting pretty much all of FNAF theorizing at this point. The questionable canonicity of books, games, movies, books based on games, and games based on books. makes having a debate about the true canon solution to FNAF impossible. When it comes to Midnight Motorist in particular, it becomes even harder because there are so many elements in that minigame that either visually or thematically parallel things from literally every single corner of the FNAF canon, across every medium the series has touched. It could mean too many different things to be deciphered as a cohesive story. With all of that being said, please never stop making theories about Midnight Motorist. When I say it's impossible to solve, I'm not saying that to in any way disparage theorists or dissuade people from even trying. That's just my personal take on it. But there are so many amazing, creative, batshit insane, wonderful theories about Midnight Motorist that people have come up with over the years. It truly is a fascinating part of FNAF. And the fact that theorists are still coming up with new ways to solve it after this many years is a testament to the incredible creativity and dedication of the FNAF fandom. And that goes for FNAF theorizing in general. It doesn't matter if anything truly gets solved or not, as long as we're all having fun and coming up with creative and interesting new ways to look at the series. I've talked about some of the more popular interpretations of Midnight Motorist in this video, including my own. But there are so many theories about this minigame out there that it would take me literal hours to cover them all. There's a theory by Cosmo that William was so utterly sloshed that he killed his own son and forgot about it. There's another theory that since the cars drive on the left side of the road, the minigame takes place in England and actually shows us William's origins as a child. There's a theory that it's about time travel. I aspire to one day be creative enough to come up with theories this out of the box. Let me know what your favorite Midnight Motorist theory is in the comments, or your own take if you have one cooked up. I'm genuinely super excited to see everyone's different takes about this minigame. While you're down there, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. That's all for now, guys, and once again, thank you for calling 808 Freddys.